I want to be clear about one thing before I explain any of this. I'm a maintenance worker. Officially, my classification is Garrison Support Grade 3, which means I fix pipes, I restock supply crates, and twice a week I mop the floor of the Eastern Beast pens before the handlers come on shift. I'm not a handler. I have never been trained as a handler. I am 44 years old, I have a bad knee, and until 8 months ago, the most dangerous animal I had ever dealt with was a thermal rat that had chewed through the coolant housing in Block 7. I want that on record because the Corps has since filed a 6-page operational brief using my name, and I think they owe me the dignity of an accurate job title. It started because of a timing problem. The Eastern pens house the garrison's juvenile veth-ari, the big ones, the tiger-coated war cubs they bring up from the breeding stations on the outer rim. At full growth, a veth-ari stands chest-high to a large man and weighs somewhere north of 400 pounds. But at the juvenile stage, 6 months to a year, they're the size of a large dog, and they are loud, and they are difficult, and the Corps handles them with a 3-person team and a full set of biometric safety protocols that take 40 minutes to run before anyone opens a gate. I was mopping. The feeding alarm had been set incorrectly. Someone on the day shift had entered the wrong time, and the automated dispensers had not cycled. The cubs had been waiting on their evening meal for 2 hours by the time I arrived at 9:15. There were 7 of them in the main holding pen, which is a large open space with a raised observation deck along the north wall and reinforced composite paneling on every surface. 7 juvenile veth-ari, hungry and working themselves into a state. They sound like something between a large cat and a sustained electrical discharge when they are agitated. I did not know that at the time. I learned it in that moment, standing in the doorway with my mop, while the alarm console above the pen entrance blinked red because the duty handler was 12 minutes away and the cubs were escalating. I looked at the console. I looked at the pen. I looked at 7 sets of eyes burning amber in the low light, 7 sets of ears flattened, 7 wide bodies pacing in tight circles. I went in. I want to be very clear. I did not do this because I was brave. I did it because I have a son who is 9 years old and who has gone through a phase, as some children do, where he absolutely refused to sleep, and I have spent 3 years learning how to talk a small panicking creature down from an elevated emotional state at 11 o'clock at night. The skill transfers. I did not know it would transfer. I found out. I walked to the center of the pen, sat down on the floor with my back against the feeding column, and I talked. Not commands. Not the handler protocols, I didn't know them. I just talked in a low, even voice I use with my son when he's worked himself into a spiral. I told them the food was coming. I told them I knew they were hungry and that was fair. It was a reasonable thing to be upset about, and I was sorry the timing had gone wrong. I told them to settle down. The first one approached me at a distance of about 8 feet and stopped. I kept talking. It sat. The second one followed about 90 seconds later, because they're social animals and the sight of one of their numbers sitting calmly is, apparently, a persuasive argument. It did not sit as far away. It sat closer. Close enough that I could feel the warmth coming off it, which is considerable. The veth-ari run hot, biologically, which is part of what makes them effective in cold climate combat deployments. By the time the third and fourth had settled, the first one had moved to lean against my left side. I kept talking. I told them about my son. I told them his name was DAV and that he was afraid of the dark at the moment and that I understood that too, because there are things in the dark that are worth being afraid of, but that right now we were going to sit quietly and wait because the food was coming and everything was going to be fine. The 5th cub crawled into my lap. It weighed, I later learned, 163 pounds. I did not move. The 6th and 7th arranged themselves along my right side and against my legs, and we sat like that, 7 juvenile veth-ari war cubs and 1 garrison maintenance worker with a bad knee, for the 11 minutes it took the duty handler to arrive. Her name was Senior Handler Vossecker, and she has since told me, in writing, that she has worked the Eastern pens for 9 years, that she has completed the full Corps certification for veth-ari management at every level, and that in 9 years, she has never seen 7 juveniles achieve simultaneous resting calm during a feeding delay without pharmaceutical intervention. She stood in the doorway for a long time. I said, the dispenser timing was off. They've been waiting a couple of hours. They're all right now. She said, I can see that. I said. I'll finish the floor once they move. She said nothing for another moment. Then she turned, walked back to the console, and began the feeding cycle. What I did not know, because I am a maintenance worker and not privy to the internal communications of the Beast Corps, was that the observation deck had been occupied. The garrison's deputy logistics commander and 2 members of the Beast Corps Oversight Board had been conducting a routine inspection of the upper facilities when the alarm triggered, and they had watched the entire thing from the deck above. The report they filed was 7 pages long. I was called into a meeting 4 days later. Handler veth-ari was there. The deputy commander was there. A woman named Corps Assessor Delnrath was there, and she had not smiled once in the first 10 minutes of the meeting, and she had a way of looking at me that suggested she had filed many reports in her career and found most of them disappointing. She asked me to describe exactly what I had said to the Cubs. I told her all of it, including the part about DAV in the dark, because she asked for exact words, and I gave her exact words. She wrote for a long time. Then she asked me what I had meant when I told them to settle down. I said I meant settle down. That's what I say to my son. I meant stop pacing and sit and breathe and let the thing that is upsetting you become less upsetting, because it is going to get better and you're going to be fine. She wrote that down too. The brief they published 3 weeks later is titled Garrison Protocol Addendum 79er, and the methodology it describes: low register vocalization, floor level physical contact, sustained calm narration during acute juvenile distress, has been formally designated Warm Ground Protocol. My name appears in the citation line. Handler veth-ari told me, not unkindly, that in 22 years of Corps operations across 14 garrison postings, no one had ever thought to sit on the floor. I did not know what to say to that. What I will tell you is this: the Cubs know me now, all 7 of them. When I come on shift to mop the eastern pen, the youngest one, the one who had crawled into my lap that first night, walks to the center of the floor and sits down and waits. The others follow. They sit in a loose ring and they watch me work, and every so often the youngest one makes a low sound that veth-ari tells me is, roughly, an inquiry, something in the register of where did you go, and are you still here, and is everything going to be fine? I tell it yes. I tell it the food is coming, and I am still here, and everything is going to be fine. It believes me every time. Handler Delnrath, the assessor, the one who had not smiled, put in for a transfer 6 weeks after the meeting, officially for a posting closer to the central stations. Unofficially, veth-ari told me, because Delnrath had attempted to re-enter the eastern pen for a follow-up evaluation, and the youngest cub had planted itself in the doorway and growled until she left. I had nothing to do with that, but I will admit I was not sorry. My son thinks the whole thing is the best story he has ever heard. He asked me if the Cubs were soft. I told him the one who sits in my lap runs at roughly body temperature of a coal stove and weighs more than both of us together and has teeth the length of my hand. He said that sounded very soft. He is 9. He is not wrong about everything. The Corps has since asked whether I would be willing to apply the protocol to 2 other juvenile cohorts at the northern pens. I said I would have to check my mopping schedule. They said they would work around it. I said that was fine. The food is coming, I told the youngest cub last Tuesday, while it leaned its enormous warm head against my knee and the others arranged themselves in their ring and waited. Everything is going to be fine. 7 amber eyes looked at me in the low light of the eastern pen. They believed me. I cannot explain that. I have stopped trying. I just keep showing up, and I keep sitting on the floor, and I keep talking in the low, even voice I learned from 3 years of late nights with my son, and somewhere in the gap between what I am and what these animals are, something holds. That is the whole of it. That is Warm Ground Protocol.